we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories that they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. They guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. I just want to add a little remark. One of the lines in this, I'll call it the standard land acknowledgement that we start with, is we acknowledge the Indigenous people who have taken care of this land, who continue to care for it. But I can tell you, every so often, and I came out of a couple of conversations I've had in the past couple of weeks, we are actually blessed in our area here because of how many Indigenous peoples that live around us, both on their own territories and amongst us, and have been caring for this area for centuries. And of recent history, even now, they're continuing to be very important in our particular community. And I think it behooves us to learn as much as we can from them, from the lessons that they have learned and have handed down over the generations. Miigwech. Council. Pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. And I know it's a budget, and I know we all have pecuniary interest in that, but outside of that, any formal conflicts that you need to declare? Seeing none, we're going to start with some delegations. The first one we have is the Muskoka Watershed Council. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Do I control it with this?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to speak very briefly because I want to.
If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself
Sure.
to everyone, because we may have an audience other than just those of us in the room.
The problem is, of course, I know who I am, so I don't think it's necessary. You don't know. I'm Peter Sale. I'm the chair of the Muskoka Watershed Council. And you know why I'm here. We've asked you for some money, and I'm here to make the case. I'm going to go fairly rapidly through the first few slides just to get us into it. I want to make sure there's time for some questions. When Pete Lemoyne was here early in the summer and talked to you, he told you about our coming report card. It's now been issued. The report card says our environment is in pretty good condition, but it also says that there are some concerning trends of deterioration in a number of different ways caused by different things. And more importantly, that those trends are not being addressed by the existing environmental management that we have in place. And that's not because people aren't doing their jobs, it's because the jobs are the wrong jobs. The kind of management that is put in place across Ontario was put in place at a time when the world was a lot simpler. Our impact on the environment was less, and the environment itself was not subject to things like climate change. What we have is a complicated system, an environment which responds to the stresses that are put on it, and they're now getting lots of stress, and it is responding in different ways, and it's changing. And we simply don't have management that's adequate to deal with that. And so the Watershed Council has been advocating for bringing in a new type of management, not completely new, it exists in other places, but it's new to this part of the world. We call it integrated watershed management, which is a fancy piece of jargon, and it's integrated in a number of ways. One of the simplest ways to illustrate is simply the integration across the watershed. We should be managing the full watershed because it's an entity. You don't look after an elephant by taking care of its left front leg. You take care of the whole elephant, and we need to be taking care of the whole watershed. But we have 13 different municipalities, each responsible for a different part, one for the front leg, one for the rear leg. That's only one kind of integration that needs to take place. There's other kinds of integration as well, but a bit more complicated than that. We've been talking about integrated watershed management since about 2018. We had a stewardship conference on the subject in 2019. We brought out this document, making a case for bringing it in 2020. We were very pleased to see that when the provincial government provided the $4+ million a couple of years ago for work in the region, that they were specifically talking about integrated watershed management, and the projects that were done were things that were the beginnings of what was necessary in order to move in that direction. What the Watershed Council is doing is taking on a task of educating the public, bringing people up to speed, making sure people understand why it's needed, why it's different from what exists at present, and what will happen if we don't do it. And we think that as a non-governmental, nonpartisan, apolitical organization, we're in a position unlike any other obvious group around. We're in a position to bring municipalities to the table as partners to build some sort of a coalition. It'll be decided by the municipalities, some sort of a coalition which will move towards and implement integrated watershed management. That's a long-term plan. It's going to take a number of years, maybe as many as a decade. And we're pushing it forward. We are not going to be in charge of it all the way. We are not seeking to make ourselves bigger and stronger or more important than we are. We don't want to become a regulatory body. It's not our job, and we don't want it. Thank you very much. But we think that at the beginning, we can help move the process forward. One of the things that came out of the money that came from the province was a small amount of the funding came to us so that we could implement a governance study which looked at how integrated watershed management has been brought in other places. And we're using that as a document to guide us in the kinds of things that need to happen. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do simply bringing the community up to speed on what the problem is, why there is a problem, how this kind of management is going to be better than it has been. And that's what we're trying to do. And what we're looking to municipalities for is to become engaged, and in this case, to contribute some money to help us get the job done during 2024. To be specific about the money, we've approached 8 lower tier municipalities. We've asked each of them for funding. The asks have ranged from $5,000 to $15,000 each. And we've done that based on our assessment of capacity in each of the municipalities, because some of them are quite small. We're asking Georgian Bay for $5,000. What that money will be used for is partly to fund these things. And if you add up those numbers, that's well more than we're asking for from municipalities. We're also looking to the private sector to help with this as well. We've already advised you, we have a conference planned for municipalities in February. We have a conference that is in the back of our minds that will take place sometime in the fall. This will be a 2-day conference for the public, bringing people up to speed, getting people involved, talking about the issue, and making the case. We're putting in a major effort in public communication, beginning with rolling out the report card, which came out a few weeks ago. We are committed to this. It's our major project at the present time for the Watershed Council, but we are a volunteer-driven organization. We have no staff. We cannot do it on our own. The only staff support we get is from the District of Muskoka. We get one person part of the time, so it's sort of a part-time secretary. She does a tremendous job, but we need more help. And this became obvious this year, and we know that next year is going to be even heavier. We need people to help us take the steps to do the kinds of things we're doing. So that's how the money is going to be used. What does the municipality gain for its contribution? To put it bluntly, you get skin in the game. If a municipality contributes dollars, that's a sign it's really committed to the project. The project is ultimately going to be driven by municipalities. The municipalities contribute are likely to be at the front. That's the way those kinds of things generally work. The other kinds of things you get, of course, is that we're going to be able to do the job that we've sort of set out for ourselves. We're going to be able to do that job better, more effectively. And that means the process can move more quickly, because this is a process that requires political will, and it requires the community to want it to happen. The district is behind having this happen. The Ministry of Natural Resources, or at least the Minister for Natural Resources, is behind having this happen. He says, keep me informed. I want to know what's happening. He's already said he wants to come to the conference in February. So I think we are getting the ducks in a row so that something effective can happen. What's the long-term value of bringing IWM in? Depends on your attitude. The environment we have is wonderful, and it is vital to our economy. And I think all of us value it deeply. If we want to retain it, we have got to change the way we manage it, because the way we're managing at the present time cannot solve the kinds of problems that now exist. If we want to manage it, we're going to have to change. This project is a way of changing. It's a sensible way. It is used in other places. We think we can bring it here. We think we can make Muskoka an example for other parts of Ontario. And we'd like to see Georgian Bay helping us do that. So that's the message. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'll try and answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sale. Appreciate it. I'm going to ask council if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. And I'm going to start with Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Cooper, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate the concept of a collaborative approach to this whole setup. Ultimately, we all know that the watershed, most of the watershed, Muskoka watershed, ends up in our backyard one way or the other. So I think this is really, really important. And my question to you is, I know that we have a presentation delegation from the SSEA as well. Have you been working with them, and will you continue to work with them as well? Even though it's not necessarily direct, there is definitely an effect on with the watershed on what the SSEA has been doing over the years.
I'm sorry, my hearing is not very good, and the sound in here is not very good. Could you repeat that again, please?
Nice to know somebody's hearing is almost as bad as mine. I'm just wondering if you work with the SSEA currently, or do you intend on working with the SSEA? Julie is behind you there, because there is definitely an indirect correlation between what the Muskoka watershed provides to us and its effect on Severn Sound and Southern Georgian Bay.
Okay. Yes, obviously, Georgian Bay is a municipality which is partly in the Muskoka River watershed, and it's partly in the Severn River Lake Simcoe watershed. And we realize that. We're not saying that the work that is going to be done and the changes that are going to happen have to be simply to the Muskoka River watershed, although that is the focus of attention. The other part of your municipality will benefit from the kinds of things that are done. And if we're successful in Muskoka, I see it spilling over to other places. Severn Sound in many ways is already well on the way to producing integrated management. It hasn't got there yet, but it's got a long way along and could easily move in that direction. So you might have both parts of your municipality being managed more effectively.
May I just continue? So are you working, do you work currently with the SSEA?
We're in contact with them and we're certainly exchanging information with them and learning from their experiences. Yes.
Thank you.
And in fact, I understand that the way in which SSEA is put together is very much the kind of arrangement that we see happening with municipalities in the Muskoka River watershed. Yeah. So you might be involved in two different but parallel operations.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Sorry, thank you, Peter, for your presentation. I just, and I've got obviously forgot to click on my mute button, which seems to have amused some of my fellow councillors. There you go. It's a good thing they don't forget to do that themselves. I just would like to sort of carry on here and get a few questions into you, just brief answers, please. But from what you just responded to, Councillor Jarvis, your main focus is going to be on the rivers and the watershed, Muskoka rivers and the watershed in that in those rivers, as opposed to Georgian Bay. That's sort of what I heard. Is that correct?
Yes, I suppose that's correct. But bear in mind that every piece of land is in a watershed. The fact that we're talking about the Muskoka River watershed, we're talking about one area of land, which is about 266 kilometers long, and it goes right to the edge of Georgian Bay. So yes, we're focusing on the Muskoka River watershed because that's a sensible ecological unit. The fact of the matter is, if we're going to manage these things, we have to manage them according to the way they're built, not the way our boundaries are set. And they're built in particular ways, and we have a watershed which drains through the Moon and the Musquash River. That's the one we're focused on.
Thank you for that answer, and it sort of helps to make us understanding that what happens in the rivers in the watershed is very important to us because we are the end result. But our job is also to look after our own backyard. And so this isn't really an initiative other than what I just described, which is the rivers emptying into Georgian Bay. Moving on, though, I'd like to understand what sort of support does your organization get from the District of Muskoka currently?
Sorry, what support do we get from
financial? What sort of financial support does?
Before I address that, let me address the conclusion that just the fact that the rivers go into Georgian Bay doesn't means that the management of the rivers has nothing to do with you. That's not true.
That's not what I said.
The rivers is everything to do with you, because what comes down those rivers is what gets into Georgian Bay. So it's not quite as simple as saying, well, there's a boundary here and we don't care about that part of it. The question about support from the District of Muskoka, a little bit of history of the Watershed Council. It was created in 2001 as a collaboration between the district and the Muskoka Heritage Foundation, which is now the Muskoka Conservancy. That partnership between those two organizations existed until 2013, when the Muskoka Conservancy said they'd done it enough and they wanted out. They had been providing office space and financial management, and the district had been providing some staff support. The district continued to provide the staff support. We eventually became incorporated as a non-governmental NGO in Ontario. So we're an independent entity now. We're a legal entity as of from 2013. Prior to that, we were the product of a collaboration. So it's a very complicated background. We've always had a strong relationship with the District of Muskoka. We continue to have one. This is our project. It is not the District of Muskoka's project. And they are saying to us, go for it. We like what you're doing. We're in, but it's your project. And I think it's important to recognize the distinction. We are not serving as the hand servants of the district in this. If the district didn't want it, we would still be pushing it. I think we'd be less successful in pushing it, but we'd still be pushing it. I don't know if that clarifies the issue, but you have to understand it's possible to have independence while still having an effective relationship. In terms of what we get from the District of Muskoka, we get a lot. We get use of their meeting rooms when they're available for our meetings. We don't have any space of ourselves anywhere, of our own anywhere. We get, as I mentioned, some staff support, and we get access to things like their staff and their GIS system when we're doing our report cards every 5 years. So putting that report card together required looking at data, which is data, not entirely, but much of the data is collected by the District of Muskoka. We had access to it. We used it to produce our report. Similarly, we asked the GIS group to do some calculations on some of their GIS information and give us the results of those so that we could interpret them. So we work very closely with them and we benefit from that relationship. But we are still an independent entity. And we will be critical of the District of Muskoka when it's necessary.
Peter, a couple of things. First of all, I don't know that you've answered my question, which was what sort of financial support do you get from the District of Muskoka?
Okay. Financially, we get $6,000 a year.
And then you get space, in-kind support. In other words,
we get in-kind support, yes. So
thank you. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you, Peter. And just to be brief and respond to your comment about Georgian Bay not caring about what happens with the rivers, I care very much. We are the end result. We're sort of like the septic system for the river systems coming in from Muskoka. I get that. It's just that what I was trying to infer is that we are spending money, quite a lot of money, to protect our environment and doing a lot of water testing, etc. So that's where we focus our main financial support. And I just wanted to understand what sort of support you're getting from the District of Muskoka. The final question is, you talked about 13 municipalities initially, and then 8. So I take it really is the 6 within the District of Muskoka, and then either another 2 or another 5 or 6 or 7, I should say. So which is it? Could you explain that, please? Thank you.
I can clarify that. For a very long time, we have had positions on the we've had positions on the Muskoka Watershed Council for councillors from municipalities. Some of them have been appointed from the district, so they've been district councillors, but every district councillor belongs to a lower tier municipality. We have always used the ones appointed by the district as members of the Watershed Council. We then have 2 additional ones that we offer to the 2 remaining Muskoka lower tier municipalities. And then we have two others, one of which goes to Algonquin Highlands and the other to Severn. Why we originally went outside the district to those two and not to others, I do not know, but that is a fact. So we have 8 municipalities, the 6 lower tier within Muskoka, plus Severn and Algonquin Highlands, which have been long-term members of the Watershed Council. We thought it was appropriate to go to them in this instance and ask for money. The other remaining municipalities are municipalities like Perry. I'm not going to try and remember them all because I'll forget some of them. Dysart et al., the Archipelago. These are municipalities we've not traditionally interacted with. We began interacting with them in about 2020 because we saw this integrated watershed management thing coming. They will be involved. We have not asked them for money. We thought it was too early in the relationship to even try that. Maybe next year.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Peter, for the presentation. Very proud to be a member of the Muskoka Watershed Council, and I think when we met in Gravenhurst for the first time, one of my first questions to you was, on the collaborative part, how much involvement do you have with SSEA and Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser? And at that point, you said that you're in conversations with them and you do work with both of them, and that was enough to say to me that you're committed to our area and I committed to the Muskoka watershed. And I think it's a very important part of what we do here. Our number one priority in our strategic plan is the environment. And if we don't demonstrate that to our constituents, then we're really not doing what we say we do. So I thank the Muskoka watershed and the SSE and Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser for all the work they do for our township. And I personally look really forward to getting involved with the Muskoka Watershed Council as well, too. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for those comments. I'll just add that when I finish here, the next thing I do is go straight up to Parry Sound for a meeting with Georgian Bay Biosphere because we're trying to work with them, and we see them as potentially a player in encouraging the public to think about integrated management in this region.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. I just have one, I'll call it fine detail. You mentioned that you've been getting $6,000 from the district in the past. Are you thinking of making a larger ask as you're going around to everybody else, or are you thinking of leaving that as is?
We made the decision when we decided to go out for money for 2024 that we needed extra money because of the extra work. We didn't go back to the district because, quite frankly, we felt that the district was supporting us quite well, had been doing so for a long time, and was showing every indication it would continue into the future. We thought it was appropriate to go to other municipalities to do this. One of the things we're trying to do with this is make clear that we are an independent organization and that we are coming to you as an independent organization, suggesting that all of the municipalities, including the district, sit around a table and we'll help them get started. If we came to you funded entirely from the district and said, we want you to do this, it would be very appropriate for you to say, well, this is the district finding a way of telling us to do something that we maybe do or don't want to do. And they're doing it through a subterfuge of pretending they're an independent organization. That's not what we're doing. That's why we didn't ask them for extra money.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands raised. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it and all the information you provided. And the best of luck to you because it's very important work that you are doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. I'll get out of here, just fill my name in on this sheet and move on.
And say hello to our friends at the Biosphere. All right. Next on our list, Severn Sound Environmental Association. You know the routine.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff. First off, before we get into the budget presentation, do not envy what you do. I get to do it in my own municipality, and with the budget pressures every municipality is facing, there's a lot of work to be done, and thank you for the work that you do. Today, we got a quick PowerPoint presentation. We're gonna go over some of the pressures that we've been facing, and I'll turn the mic over to Julie. I think a lot of the discussion will get pulled out during question period though. So with that, our ED, Julie Cayley.
Thank you, and thank you, Your Worship, council, staff, and guests, if we have some guests on the line as well. And of course, our guest in the audience here. I am obviously not going the right direction. Oh, there we go. It's the down, not the up. We've been your joint municipal service board since 2009. I'm, as mentioned, Julie Cayley, the executive director of the Severn Sound Environmental Association. We've been your joint municipal service board along with 7 other municipal partners. We're also your source protection authority under the Clean Water Act. And I'm going to walk through some of the highlights from 23 and then speak to some of the plan as we start to speak to the budget for 24. Open water, Severn Sound, long-term water quality monitoring had continued in 23. We're still in it. We just finished doing our open water runs. We now end just below Port Severn. As you know, we no longer do Honey Harbor in 2023 as directed by your township. We are tracking seasonal changes in nutrients and algae. We're seeing a lot more blue-green algae blooms. And we do have in-house capacity to do blue-green algae identification, which is really fantastic. We're seeing more blooms earlier and lasting longer. We're still doing tributary monitoring as well. So the Severn River, and we're going to continue expanding our citizen science programs. We do have ongoing concerns. You can see on the map here. I realize the map's pretty small. We can certainly get you a larger map as a follow-up so you can see all of our open water sampling sites. We have brought the concerns to the attention of our watershed municipalities before, but for you in specific, we indicated that obviously the concerns, and I bring this up now, even though the data is from 2022. Some of you may know that when we do our chemistry work, we don't often get the results until the following year. But South and North Bay certainly seeing some trends, some declining trends in water quality, dissolved oxygen, increasing nutrients, and some blue-green algae bloom threats. We're also seeing long-term air water temperature increases, which we all know has significant water quality and algae and dissolved oxygen potential impacts, and also increases in sodium and chloride levels in the Severn River, certainly a potential for impacting municipal drinking water. So also for activities in 2023, over 1,700 native tree seedlings were distributed to Georgian Bay participants. We're looking forward to similar or increased uptake this coming year. We also secured funding from 2 Billion Trees, federal funding to expand that program. Our invasive species program, we continue to respond to both municipal and public inquiries, providing pollinator invasive plant session for the district seniors program that happened in Georgian Bay Township as well. In terms of drinking water source protection, SSEA is your source protection authority, and as such, we support the township in meeting your obligations, including your annual reporting requirements to the province, and we're also your risk management official and inspector. The Sustainable Severn Sound project gained some momentum finally this year as we finally hired and have kept a coordinator, making progress with your staff towards milestones 4 of the PCP, or Partners in Climate Protection Program, and climate action implementation planning, and supporting your staff in grant applications and specifically around climate actions. So looking forward into 2024, as you look towards the budget that you've probably got in front of you, we have significant work, obviously, going to continue, including finalizing the renewal of our strategic plan. So if you haven't already, hopefully you've received our online survey. If you could fill that out, that would be fantastic, and share with anybody in your municipality who could also provide some input to the strategic planning process. We have that survey online. We've had a great response so far. We're going to also be finalizing the state of the Severn Sound report. So that's 20 years post delisting. We were once an area of concern. And so we're looking at the past 20 years worth of data. We're doing that with a postdoc fellow from Trent University. We're also finishing a pilot stormwater receiving water monitoring for small municipalities project that would support our municipalities and obligations that are changing under the stormwater regulations. And both of these are funded by the province. So those will be completed in 2024. Obviously, the tree seedling and planting program continues. So we're certainly looking forward to uptake again from not just the municipality, but from your citizens as well. And we will continue protecting your municipal drinking water sources through the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. Also supporting township residents and staff in the IS program. So doing invasive species IS program, sustainable Severn Sound climate action and funding support, and education and outreach. So we've just completed, some of you I know took part in an online series of webinars for municipal staff and council around provincial permits and approvals. We expect to expand that series. We've had certain feedback from municipal staff and council suggesting other topics. So we'll be looking to continue that. Also always looking forward to more volunteers within our citizen science program. So anyone around the table or anyone listening or anyone you know who might want to be a citizen science volunteer, we'd love to hear from them. So you have our ask in front of you. So this is the 2024 budget for Georgian Bay approved by the Severn Sound Environmental Association Board. I'm not sure I need to go through the numbers. You have them in front of you. And, you know, as our chair indicated, we know everybody's costs are increasing. This certainly also reflects some decisions made in 2022 for our 2023 budget in terms of some carryover expense from our board decision. And so happy to speak to questions you might have about that. Thank you.
Just before we jump into that, your worship, I did want to, I was remiss in not thanking our current serving board members from Georgian Bay, Councillor Bocek and Councillor Graziano as the alternate. I do want to address, call it the elephant in the room, in the number. The SSCA is a partnership. We have 8 municipalities. We work together to steward the watershed, just as Mr. Sales has the Muskoka watershed. We look after the Severn Sound watershed. The 12.33%, when you look at it as a percentage, it's not a really nice percent. But when you look at it as a number, we're talking about roughly $10,000 increase over last year. And I would say we succeed as a partnership, but we also fail as a partnership. And I think a previous decision by the board, which included members from my municipality and your municipality, we decided to fund operational costs out of reserves. And so we end up having to move those costs forward into the next year. The attempt was to make things cheaper in last year's budget. And what's the word? We're feeling it now. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Your Worship.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And I'll turn it over to council and ask council if there are any questions that anybody has. And we'll start with Councillor Bocek, followed by Cooper and Jarvis, please.
Well, thank you, guys, and thanks for coming by. I didn't get a chance to say good morning, but I did see Julie in the parking lot. I have a couple of questions. And first question is, we seem to be having environmental issues caused by human impact in our area. And one of the major ones right now is a project that's or is going to be underway or could be underway with crushing granite and the effects it would have on the environment. Being that this operation would take place in Severn Sound and very close to your source water protection area, as a matter of fact, in your source water protection area, if SSE was called upon to give expert witness at an OLT case, would you be able to supply us with evidence to do with source water in a case like that?
Through your worship to Councillor Bocek, if we had the expertise on staff that would be required to present at something like that, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And secondly, I did attend the Elmville session that we had where you did some demonstrations of testing upstream at the source where there was possible damage being done, and then downstream. I'm just wondering, in cases where Parks Canada is doing a reconstruction of dam work in Port Severn, and we have Little Lake on the top, we have the dam, and then we have Georgian Bay on the bottom. Would that be something that your folks would get involved in doing water testing at those type of locations if requested?
Thank you, through your worship. Yes, we could. We do actually usually get engaged by Parks Canada when they're about to do those projects. Federally, I mean, probably not with them, but we could outside of them if the municipality wanted to do some upstream, downstream monitoring.
Yeah, and I know the province is engaged
Okay.
very much so with
Yeah.
the upstream and downstream. That's great. I look forward to working with you guys again, and you do super work, and I look to be more involved this coming year as well too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I see that I'm unmuted. Thank you. Just wanted to start off with at the outset. Sorry, I'm not in the room. I'm zooming in, and who is the gentleman that's speaking to us? There was no introduction.
Apologies, Councillor Cooper. My name's Stefan Walma. I'm a councillor in the Township of Tiny, and I'm the chair of the Severn Sound Board.
Thank you for the clarification. So this is probably to Cayley. I see that in 2023, we had discontinued the Honey Harbor testing, frankly, because we are already testing there with another organization and doing a lot of testing in Honey Harbor, so it's really redundant. And now I see that there's a figure in there for Honey Harbor again. Where did that come from? Where did you get direction on that? I don't recall council having a discussion about adding that back in. Could you clarify, please?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Cooper. I take direction from my board, and the direction that came from Georgian Bay Council in 23 was to remove that from 2023. I did not receive direction to remove it in 2024, and as it was in our budget, it was approved at the board table as such. And my understanding is that you could remove it again. Thank you. I see my board chair reaching for speaking.
Sorry, absolutely can be removed again. Just wanted to point out too that from the SSEA board perspective, we have a set amount of lab load that we basically have an amazing contract with the province over. And if we were to dismiss that particular piece of our lab load, we don't ever have the opportunity to get it back. Those labs are very busy, and they're also costly. So by discontinuing that monitoring program in perpetuity, we lose that lab load in the future. So we were hoping to maintain it. It's there for your discretion. If you do want to remove it, you can do that, and simply just ask us to remove it in perpetuity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that clarification. And I guess in 2023, we didn't actually say in perpetuity. So maybe we need to clarify that. Just one other thing is we've noted over the years that there seem to be some issues, especially related to heavy rains and runoff from shore into Georgian Bay. And we have a water testing organization that is frankly going around and changing the locations they go to from time to time and going out right after heavy rains. I wonder what SSEA has to say about that kind of water testing, and are you and can you not do that in Severn Sound, the Georgian Bay portion of Severn Sound, which I think is quite a bit actually. I think you're doing 2 sites or so for us presently, but I'd like to know what you do about heavy rainfall and tracking the runoff from the land. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Cooper. For traditionally the 35 years of water sampling we've done in Georgian Bay and in the watershed of Georgian Bay has been flow weighted, so event weighted. So we do have samples from both dry, wet, storm, spring, all of the seasons. We now basically do what we can when we can get a boat, when we can get out there. So some of them will be event based and some will not. We don't have access full time. We don't own a boat. And we need, particularly in this day and age, you need a licensed captain to be able to take our staff and our equipment out. And so that we schedule that. And unfortunately, that doesn't always fall within in those times of events, if that's what we're trying to capture. That's certainly something, if any municipality wanted us to shift the way we're sampling to try to catch events that you're concerned about, that's certainly something we could be doing. We're here to serve our municipal interest. And so if we get directed in some other ways you want to do things, and work with we have a scientist on staff who does a lot of monitoring program development, and can certainly help create those to make sure you're capturing the outcome that you're looking to capture. The project that Councillor Bocek referred to, that he came out and saw in the field, is actually a stormwater project where we are specifically going out in rivers that are around stormwater discharge sites after events to see what kind of impact those sites are having. So we certainly are in a position to change our sampling programs based on outcomes that or impacts we're looking for. Thank you.
Final comment, if I may, Mayor, and that is my recommendation. Thank you, Mayor. I jump in sometimes. I apologize, but I'd just like to say that given that a lot of the test sites that I see in your material are in the water, maybe a boat would be a good idea. I don't know how else you're going to get it. You're not going to swim there. So I think
Proposing to give us some more money?
Or a boat.
well, I suggest that you might want to raise some money because of the water testing that you're doing in the water, which requires a boat. That's my suggestion to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, do you have a vote to offer?
I have a boat. I'm not offering it to anybody. Mind you, the price is right. I've got three things. First is, what is RAP? That was in your presentation. I didn't indicate what that was.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jarvis. The RAP, I apologize, that's a historical term. I was trying to whip through the beginning of my slide.
Yeah.
That was the remedial action plan.
Oh,
So in the early days, in the late 70s, early 80s, when we were designated one of the Great Lakes areas of concern, so one of the most polluted areas on the Great Lakes, the action plan at that time is known as a remedial action plan. And it involved the community, all of our municipalities, upper and lower tier governments, suggesting what could be done to improve the area.
okay. Thank you.
And just to brag a little bit, sorry, SSEA RAP is recognized by the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative as one of 2 sites that have been delisted out of 14. So we're pushing hard and doing good work in our area.
No, and actually, I'll acknowledge that the work of the SSEA over the years since '87 has been phenomenal in restoring in the basin, which is really wonderful. So my next question sort of ties 2 things together here. One is stormwater runoff, which I know that this ties in with Councillor Cooper's comments, and the other is the blue-green algae work that you're doing. In both cases, obviously, it's acknowledged the blue-green algae is a problem. 2, that stormwater runoff management from communities. I'll take Midland, Penetang, Victoria Harbor, those areas. I know Collingwood has issues as well, but that's outside our zone. So my question regards both of them. We know these are issues. In a stormwater runoff situation, we understand the cause and why it happens. So there's got to be work done with the municipalities to sort that out. And blue-green algae is a little bit more ambiguous in that we don't know, or we haven't been given any indication of what's causing the blue-green algae, how we can remediate that situation. And so I'm asking you, and this is something I've sort of commented on in the past, is how can the SSEA take the information that they gather, or how would they, and basically use it to try and get, as you have in the past, I mean, this is what you were good at, is remediate what's been going on. How do you make, I'd like to see recommendations on where we can go to reduce blue-green algae, for example, and to work with the municipalities to reduce these amazing stormwater runoff events that we're getting more and more of due to climate change.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jarvis. So really great questions. Stormwater is coming off all the land, right? So not just large scale or larger municipalities. So that's often what we're looking at is that's what's in a lot of our rivers, right? Is by the time they get to Georgian Bay, stormwater is certainly having a significant impact, whether it's off, parking lots, developments, any such thing. Probably a good connection to blue-green algae. I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors probably happening all at once. It's a perfect fit. I would almost think you'd already talked to our board chair. Thank you to Tiny Township, who last year asked us to do a special project looking specifically at algae bloom causation in Farlane Lake, which is a smaller inland lake in the township of Tiny. We're just wrapping that up now. So they provided the funding for some new equipment so we can do more rapid testing, looking for algae and algae blooms of potential toxicity, as well as funding for a position. So we had a body working on that for almost a full year. So we'll be in the process of trying to pull that together. That will likely have some recommendations that I don't think are going to be surprises to anybody about shoreline maintenance, managing your land, even if you're upstream and not on a shoreline. And certainly could provide some recommendations around a stewardship project, probably what you're speaking to in terms of how we can manage our impact on the water. There are things happening in the water, and the speaker before me certainly alluded to and is an expert in some of these things as well. We have an expert on staff who really, there's so much going on right now with climate, changing climate, warming water, more and more impacts from ourselves that, I think we can certainly start to make some headway. I would personally love to see us get more into stewardship like we used to be, like you mentioned, where we're actually doing more remedial action-based work, not just our tree planting and our IS program. But again, that takes a bit of a shift and financial shift as well for us, and certainly can be a discussion at our board.
Attitudinal shift from the municipalities to fund you as well then?
If I may. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think everyone's on the same page with this. But to Julie's comment about the financial component of it is that the core funding model funds all the monitoring and the staff work associated with that. If something is identified like the blue-green algae, it is exactly someone like yourself that would be putting forward that recommendation. Okay, what do we do? And that is the program that she mentioned that Tiny initiated. That's a special project, and that's a cost that's on top of the general outline of the core funding for SSCA. So 100%, I think that the board is willing to undertake those initiatives and look into ways to remediate as well. But under the current agreement and current MOU that we have with those 8 partners, we don't jump in and start doing it unless we have the additional funding and support of the municipality that's asking for it.
With the mayor's indulgence? Just further to that, then, this is where I have trouble. We get the information, and then it's sort of up to us as what gets done with it. But if the information doesn't also include ideas to us on how we can mitigate these situations, it's really, really difficult. And I've got to justify with my constituents why we're spending the money just to get numbers. If we get recommendations from those numbers, it makes more sense. And it's easier for me to discuss it with my constituents because we don't have our tax base as our constituents. There's not much else from our standpoint in that regard. And while I really appreciate and admire the work the SSEA has done, to move forward, we need to be able to tell people, well, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it. And the SSEA is the supporting agency for why we're doing it.
I appreciate those comments, Councillor. I can only say that we have a meeting at the end of the month, and Councillor Bocek and I can have a discussion along with yourself about maybe making some changes to how we bring forward reports on our monitoring.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands raised, so I'm going to say thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it, and certainly appreciate all the work that you have done. The fact that you've got the Severn Sound delisted a few years back is obviously an amazing accomplishment. We just got to make sure it never gets listed again.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
So Ms. McGibbon and Ms. Clare, over to you, please.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for saving the best for last.
I'm
We're not allowed to say that, you know.
I know. We're excited to be here today to share our plans for 2024. Stephanie's just going to get us set up. We both had the wonderful thing happen this morning where Zoom said it was going to update. So that threw us for a little bit of a loop.
and I'm just noticing now, Sydney, I believe I need screen sharing permissions, please, and thank you.
You should be good now.
Great.
Okay,
Great.
very good.
Perfect. I'm just going to kick things off, and Stephanie and I are going to sort of frick and frack a little bit through this. We are excited to be here today to share our plans for 2024. We have been working hard this fall with our board and our great GBPL team to review and assess 2023 to determine where we've been successful, where we have gaps, and where should our focus be in 2024. So we're going to share that assessment with you and then share what key initiatives we feel as a group will best serve our community in 2024. We have some background information in an appendix, which we're not going to go through today, but a lot of our data and different data sources that we've been accessing to help build our plan is in the appendix, should you want to have a look at that at a later date. So I'm going to kick it off. I think what a great picture. This picture on our front page, I think, is a really great indication of how we're a partner with the township and how we are a partner with community development in the township of Georgian Bay. And this was one of our great programs at the library where our fabulous fire department was in doing and reading stories for the kids in our community, and we love this picture. We can't say it any better than this picture. So I'm going to turn it over to Steph to talk about 2023, and we thought it was important to share with you some of our achievements in the last year since we've reported back to you. So over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Susan. And yes, just to reiterate, we did have a fire truck outside of the branch when this photo was taken, and everybody got to go in, program participants and staff included. So it was a great day overall. So to kick it off with some of our initiatives, we had a big year. It was a good year, and I'll just go through this list here with a couple details, and then of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But we have submitted our paperwork, our final paperwork for the accreditation, which I believe we spoke about last year when we were here, and there's been positive response. So we're just waiting on the final report, but don't anticipate any issues. We have the new OMERS program that was rolled out to all eligible staff. We piloted our Sunday hours in Honey Harbor. The board completed OLS training. So this is the Ontario Library Service. They provide training for board members each term. So they've all completed that. We developed a remote summer reading club program for island residents and camp goers. So this was a big piece for us this summer. We worked with the Cognition Rec program and saw a lot of positive response here. We have continued to expand our program and community outreach. We've transitioned our public work computers, our public workstations, to a new software to update them, to go through the required security updates and just service updates in general. We partnered with the township on the food cycler program, where we acted as a pickup location for residents needing a spot to pick up their food cycler, which has been very popular. We supported the MacTier Food Bank in their transition to their new location. We're acting as a pop-up location in MacTier for Service Ontario. There's a gap in service there currently, and in order to continue serving the residents there, they're using our location, and it's been a really great partnership. We've received some grants this year. We had our summer experience program, and we've also received the International Dyslexia Association mini grant. We had 3 summer students, an increase from 2022. And we're working on our upcoming strategic plan along with the Georgian Bay Public Library rebrand.
Does anyone have any questions about 2023? Because there's more. Go Steph.
Okay, so some of we did a lot, but some of these sort of initiatives resulted in some really great results for us. So we've had increased active cardholders. So year over year, we continue to increase our active cardholders coming into the library, using the library, signing up for library cards, checking out books, just overall participation. We've seen increased patron visits to all 3 of our branches. And I think a good point here is last year, we were open the majority of the year. It was no longer a COVID year. So I think this one is really impressive because it's no longer, comparing to a year of closures. It's comparing to pretty much a year of regular traffic. Our digital checkouts. So digital checkouts include ebooks, e-audiobooks, magazines, basically our digital collection accessed through Overdrive on the Libby app. So these have continued to increase steadily from 2019. This is a trend that continues to rise, especially after the past few years. We have seen increased program attendance.
Not just increased.
We've seen
super increased.
Super increased program attendance this summer compared to last year as well. You can see July and August 22 to 23. Both months have had an incredible amount of increase. I like to use this stat every year. Public libraries do annual surveys, and basically on the provincial reporting software, anything that's over 5% is flagged for review. So their margin is basically year over year. Anything more than 5% is flagged as something that should be reviewed because the system thinks it's an error. So we're really going above and beyond the sort of normal growth statistics. I did mention earlier our enhanced community engagement and outreach, and we've included some of them here. We've done regular visits to cottage associations. We have our regular meetings with the Friends of the MacTier Library. We participated as a committee member, but also as on the day of event, the Honeybee Festival. Our board chair, Susan, is part of the Federation of Public Libraries Board of Directors, and I sit on the Government Relations Working Group. We're very active with the administrators of urban and rural public libraries. We've attended MacTier Lions Club events, the Gloucester Pool Cottage Association Family Fun Day. We've had some early on family visits off-site to their location. I presented at the 2023 Ontario Library Super Conference, and we were last year and we will be again this year part of the Port Severn and MacTier Santa Claus parades. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but we've been busy. And then in addition to our community engagement, we have regular planning meetings with the township senior management team. I met a few months back with the district chair of Muskoka, Jeff Lehman, as well as our neighboring municipality, Tay Township. So in my regular Muskoka library meetings, Tay is obviously not there. They're in a different area. So I have connected with her separately to touch base because of how close we are. And then as well, the Simcoe Muskoka Library CEO networking meetings.
Councillor Cooper, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Susan and Stephanie. Great report, and I can see a number of things here, including the outreach. Obviously, makes a contribution to the program attendance and the results that you're getting. That's what outreach is looking like. At least to me, that's the part of the reason for such an increase. So congratulations on that. I just wanted to ask from the previous page, you don't need to go back, but you talked about programs with island residents and camp goers. When you say camp goers, do you mean the Y camps, or do you mean camp goers in terms of programs with cottage associations? That's my first question. The second one is, are there other programs out in Georgian Bay where, and I don't mean just coastal Georgian Bay, anywhere where there's a program like the one in Cognachine? I think there's one in Honey Harbor, for example. Are you aligned and doing the same kind of work with them as you've been doing with Cognachine? And what about elsewhere, in other inland lakes and so on? Do they have summer programs, with over 100 kids in it, like Cognachine? Could you articulate your involvement with those other organizations? Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for the feedback. It's been an exciting year being out and about. So we have connected with, it was the Cognachine Rec program. We used it this year as sort of our pilot program to see how it would work and if it would support that group in a way that made sense for them and that was supportive. It went very well. And the intent now is that we have this sort of packaged program that we're able to use going forward with other groups who are interested. So other inland lake associations, the Honey Harbor camp, I know like you had mentioned there as well. So it was a good connection. And now we can sort of take that project and apply it to all these other groups that may be of interest.
We have connected, Peter, last year with the Honey Harbor group, and Steph was at the Honey Harbor Cottage Association meeting. I think we have an expectation we'll get something moving with them this summer. And we have a couple of the camps on our list that are just outside of Honey Harbor to look at for programming for 2024. So I think it was important to have a pilot, and we had a great champion in Jenna Harold from Cognachine working in coordination with Steph to make it successful. So now we can take it forward. And we can certainly look at other areas within the township, but Cognachine stepped forward and was keen to pull something together, so we grabbed that opportunity.
Thanks for the answer, guys. Great program.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to see if I've missed anything here, but I think that about captures it.
Great.
I'll move on here.
So as a board and a team, I have to say on behalf of everybody, we're really proud. Great achievements for last year. We've come a long way. But there's more to do, and we're excited about it. So in our analysis as a board and with our team, we have spent considerable time looking at data to try to support some of our thinking and some of our ideas before we just go forward and just try things out. We really want to make sure that we're putting things into the market for our community that makes sense and are what the community needs. And we strongly believe as a board that data should drive our decisions, so that we're developing, really successful strategies. And so that's included us as a team looking at a whole lot of different data points. We've reviewed the Canadian census data. We've looked back at our member survey data. We have spent a lot of time looking at the new guidelines from the RUPL Rural Ontario Library Guide, which is a fantastic new source of data for us. We're really excited and have reviewed in depth the new District of Muskoka Second Home Study that's given us just a really big set of data points to apply to how the library can better serve seasonal residents. And Stephanie's got, as she mentioned, monthly conversations with CEOs across the province. And then in addition, our roles on the Federation of Ontario Public Library board and committees has allowed us to start sharing all kinds of data and conversations with other rural library systems. So we've paid a lot of attention to pulling all of that together and saying, so what insights can we take away from that process, and what's our key learning? So we feel certainly 2022 and 2023 were our key rebuilding years, and we feel we're in a really strong position now in which to grow, and we're very confident in now expanding our offering. We feel that we're a very nimble team now and very well organized. You've got two Sagittarians who love lists between Stephanie and I to get stuff done. So it's allowed us to adapt and change quickly based on the needs of, what we have as a very growing and diverse community. Our focus on strategic partnerships has really assisted us with identifying and implementing efficiencies for the service delivery of library services for the township. And we certainly feel from all the feedback we've had, particularly in this last summer seasonal season, that we are very much recognized and used as the community hub within all of our communities for both permanent, seasonal, and new residents coming into the community. So then we, as a group, had a number of working sessions this fall and have a focus on some key initiatives. But we have based those key initiatives on our summary of what's our situation today. We don't have to say and certainly tell you that the face of rural communities is changing rapidly. There's an increasing urbanization across the province. We've got an aging and diverse population, and the impact of technology and remote work and education on rural lifestyles has had a long-term effect, particularly after COVID. We know there are a lot of new permanent residents moving from the GTA to the township, and when they come to the township, they are coming with potentially broader service level expectations because they may have been going to a bigger library somewhere in the GTA. We know from the District of Muskoka Second Home Study, seasonal residents are residing in the township for greater lengths of time on a yearly basis. So that's requiring us now to look at, we need an extended season of programming and services, where in the past, we really looked at July and August as our busy months and everything else was, much quieter and not as much happening. The seasonal residents that are accessing our library services, which is great, also then affects our operations in terms of our opening hours and our staffing levels. One of the things Stephanie piloted this summer with great success was that we were open on Sundays, and it was a great success because seasonal residents are there. We've also had higher programming levels in September than we expected. So again, another great pilot to show that we need to look at the seasonal resident being in residence longer than in the past. We also learned from the data that seasonal residents make up 82% of the township. And so this doesn't mean that we stop paying attention to the permanent resident who has been the focus of the design of library services in the past, but it said to us as a board, we really need to have some specific focus on seasonal residents going forward. We also learned from the Second Home Study that 48% of the population in the district is 55 plus. And when we looked back and analyzed our programming and our services, we're really underserving that 55 age group with our library services. A couple of other challenges we have, our current staffing levels and our type of staff and our space requirements and our hours of operation are currently not really following the rural best practices guideline for the population of our size. And, I think as a board and as a team under Stephanie, we don't look at our population as the permanent resident population. We're looking at the 19,000 people that when you add seasonal and permanent together in the District of Muskoka study, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the 19,000. So how do we best serve 19,000 people in our 3 branches going forward? And coupled with that is our lack of full-time positions. Stephanie is our only full-time position. Everyone else is part-time. It's creating challenges for recruitment and retention because we learn within the community, staff move around a lot if they can then find a full-time job somewhere else within the township. So it's something we're starting to pay some attention to. Councillor Cooper.
To keep jumping in here, just a quick some observations for you, especially on the statistical side, which is, of course, for me, it's fascinating. All the statistics that come out, I jump all over them. 2 things. One is you need to understand that the Second Home Study, the last one that was conducted, the surveys went out in, I think, January, February, when sort of the cat's away. The cat's away. the seasonal residents, 82%, are not always going to be responding the same way they might in the summer months. And so if anything, the numbers are, I would suggest to you, quite conservative.
Yeah, we would agree.
And they showed that the growth was low in seasonal residents. I don't buy it at all. And especially as it pertains to the library. The second thing is that I like your statistic also about you know, the size of the group of 55 and older. And I just think it's important for us to all remember that in that group, communicating with them and the way they want to be communicated to is very important.
Yes.
You know, they'll respond to emails. I suggest to you that the 55+ crowd are not big social media people. They're not all over Facebook. Some are, but many aren't. So I think it's important to remember how to communicate with that crowd that is almost 50% of your group, your customer base, shall we say. Anyway, just a few comments for you in terms of taking advantage of or understanding what the stats tell us. Thanks.
Great. Steph, let's flip to page 6. So based on our key learning, our achievements, and all of the data that we've reviewed and our strategic conversations as a board, we have put together 3 key initiatives that we feel are the most important for us to focus on in the 2024 season. The first one is related to the Honey Harbor Park landing space. We saw huge differences this season with the amount of people in Honey Harbor and the amount of people coming to the Honey Harbor branch. And because we had the old space to use as a programming space, I don't think we would have satisfied all of our community if we hadn't had that space. So it was a great test for us to have that back. But we feel going forward and looking at the amount of people that are, again, in residence and for longer periods of time, that we feel it's important for us to utilize that branch location as a permanent, collaborative, and creative, flexible space for programming, meetings, and community services. And we feel that we can make it useful and full and active 12 months a year. And if we are able to do that, it needs a slight refresh and updating, just because it just needs a coat of paint and some carpets cleaned. It's not a major renovation, but we feel we need that space to satisfy the needs of the residents that are in and around and coming into Honey Harbor, particularly the seasonal residents. But also we have a strong group of moms and kids that are looking for year-round programming, and Honey Harbor is the best place for that to happen. The second thing we would like to focus on is adding 1 full-time position to our staff. That full-time position would have a focus on engaging and building strategic partnerships with the township, our community organizations, excuse me, our local schools, businesses, and other organizations. We feel it's a key thing we need to continue doing. Stephanie's done an awesome job on top of everything else she does to start to make this happen, but it needs to be done in an even larger way. That person will also then develop the programming plans and services based on the needs of our community in coordination with our 3 great branch managers, and also develop a marketing communications plan, back to Councillor Cooper's comment on reaching residents via various channels. And we certainly agree with you, Councillor Cooper, there needs to be multiple ways we communicate with all the constituents to create awareness about our library services and programs. And I'm just going to go to the 3rd initiative, and then we can come back because I see a question already. The 3rd thing we want to do is add new and additional programming and services to meet resident demand and growth. And we want to focus the new programming and services on top of what we've already created this year to focus on the 55+ adult. We want to also expand some of our current programming during the off season, during weekdays, and extend our summer season from June through September. We also are working on and will launch a new fully accessible interactive website for residents to use. And a lot of residents are using that off season as well. And you're seeing those statistics in the digital statistics. Stephanie's working on a big thing within the library world is digital literacy programming initiatives. And there's a lot of work at FOPL going on to work with the Ontario government to have a digital literacy grant potentially for every library system. And we're doing the finalization and implementation of the Honey Harbor Broadband Internet Grant. So all of those things will come together in terms of programming and services to help meet our resident demand and growth. So go back to Councillor Cooper. I don't know if you want us to go back to the slide before or.
If you don't mind,
Steph
I'd
can
like
do that.
a quick comment about Honey Harbor Park Landing.
Mhm.
You talked about the amount of growth over the last season or seasons, and I think that's exciting, very exciting, how much more activity there is today than there was a year or two or three ago, which makes me sort of ask this question, because you already talked about extra staff, but sounds to me like in Honey Harbor, you may need extra space. Is that something that would be considered in the future by your organization? Thank you.
We do need, I think long-term, yes, we do need extra space. We discussed it at length as a board, and we think at some point as a group and with council, we should be looking at a conversation around the Honey Harbor branch and the Port Severn branch. We don't feel that should be a focus in 2024, but it's on our list. We feel in the short term, Peter, if we have the current library location, which is in the school, along with Park Landing, we can satisfy the demand. Long term, potentially not. And it's not ideal to have two locations to, have to cross the street and the staff spend a lot of time directing people from one to another, but we know how to make it work. So it's a great solution in the short term.
Thank you for that answer. And I agree with you in terms of two locations are not ideal, but you're dealing with it at the moment. I'd like to think that at some point we'd have you in one location. So thank you.
No problem. Does anyone else have questions on key initiatives? If not, I'll flip it over to Stephanie to talk about our budget.
Yes.
Our favorite part. No.
So thank you, Susan, for going over that. Those key initiatives, and I'm sure there may be questions at the end as well. But in order to continue to grow and implement these three key initiatives that Susan has just taken you through, we've estimated that we need a municipal grant of $496,193. And as you can see here, this is combined with additional funding from provincial funding, DC reserve funding, and it brings our total operating budget to an increase of 18% from 2023. There's a few footnotes at the bottom here. This chart here does not include other funding in addition to the public library operating grant. So for example, the summer experience grant or any additional specific programming grants. There's a lot of sustainability grants or different things that you can access to go sort of above and beyond. This does not include that. Another thing I'd like to point out is that we are working closely, Susan mentioned it briefly, but just to sort of add on to that, we are working closely with FOPL, the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries, to lobby the provincial government for an additional amount to be applied to the PLOG grant, as well as the creation of a new digital library grant. So there's two pieces here that we're working on as well.
So just as a quick refresher, the PLOG grant, which on this chart, as Stephanie shows, we get $28,499 from the province. So the intent is this fall in mid-November, there are 2 days at Queen's Park where all of the Ontario library CEOs are coming together to lobby the provincial government, and it's being led by FOPL, which is one of the reasons Stephanie and I have gotten on the board and on the committees, because we last year said to you that we were committed to try to move ahead to have the province take more seriously the amount of funding that it's giving to public libraries. So those 2 days in November are going to be big days where FOPL presents, as Stephanie's just outlined, the ask for an additional $25 million for public libraries. So we'll be pleased to report back to you after those 2 days, but you know, again, the provincial funding is based on census data of permanent residents only, and that's part of the issue. And we're not the only rural library system where that is an issue.
I see a hand.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just to clarify, and thank you, Susan, you partially did.
Okay.
The provincial funding, that's the block grant. Stephanie, could you indicate to us when was the last time the province increased their funding to libraries?
It's about 20 years ago, if not more at that. Yeah.
So just for everybody's information, that block grant hasn't changed in that period of time, which is really distressing in many ways for all the library systems. And with any luck, we will see over time an improvement in the amount of money the province provides to library systems, and ours included. But that's an important thing to note.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And just looking at your numbers here, I mean, obviously, the increase from 2023 was a very big increase, and I think had a lot of discussion about why that was an important investment that we were making in the library. I think there was pay equity included in that. And looking at your increase for this year, it's another 19%, which is a large increase compared to the constraints that I think other departments within the township are probably going to be feeling. And one of the big number increases, I'm assuming, is that full-time staff complement for helping you with communications and outreach and program coordination. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think, Steph, why don't you go to the next slide, because that's a great question. No, it's perfect timing. So there's your breakdown. Just so I'll let Stephanie walk you through it.
And just it sort of elaborates there on what Councillor Predko was asking. This is sort of the breakdown of the difference in funds from 2023 to 2024. And you can see that yes, a large portion of that would be to HR.
So the main ask, Councillor Predko, from the township is $83,617. It splits out really, and again, it's coming back as we talked last year. HR is is our largest expense. So to hire that other full-time person, you see the line there, and operations and other are really the focus on the other two key initiatives that we walked you through. So it's a much smaller ask than last year, of course, because we're in a way better position, and everything from a operations and HR perspective is well organized now. So that's the main ask.
So the corollary to that thank you for clarifying that too. I know the township on the whole would also feel, I think, that they have a need for somebody to help coordinate programming. I think the arena in MacTier, working with the library and their space that they have available, and I think our sustainability department, if they had more resource available to help coordinate and communicate and develop community programming, I think it would be a win. Do you think that there's an opportunity to have a shared resource for this type of a person between the township and the library? And is that something that could be explored as we go through the budget process?
It's a great question. We have not talked about that. It's something we could have a conversation about. I know that Stephanie, and she can speak to this, already works as much as she can in coordination with everyone at the township. I think we've talked as a board many times that potentially you don't need to hire someone in the township because we already exist. Now, we have some limitations in terms of what we can deliver on. And we have primary services as a public library we need to deliver on. But we've tried to step up with things like the food cycler and partnering on different types of speakers and programs where we can take some of that role so the township doesn't have to add staff. But it's a conversation we have not had at the board level. We can have it and have with you. But that's sort of, I think, a simple frame of reference right now. Stephanie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think just to add that the library, our staff currently and sort of in the future as well, we do work to support all of the same people. You know, we're all serving the residents. And we, as Susan mentioned, we are sort of governed by specific goals, but we do support where we can. And as much as possible, I think there's no need to overlap, but rather just support and work together in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jarvis, did you have your hand up or are you gone? I can't see you on the screen anymore.
Dan, I may have a comment for the end of the program here.
I was just wondering if you have any more slides to show us.
Just one.
Let's get the slideshow done and then we can all go.
Okay.
Screen, please.
Okay, just going to leave you with a final thought. So I think from a board perspective and a team perspective, we've had huge learning in the last 3 years, and we, I think, have a really much clearer understanding in what our role as the public library system is in terms of rural sustainability and community well-being. And you well know, as a council, we have to find creative ways to sustain our community and ensure that services can meet growing needs and expectations. So that's a lot of what we've been looking at, is what are the needs and expectations of our residents from a library perspective, and what can we do to meet those needs. And as we've talked earlier, we spent a lot of time looking at data so that it's important from our perspective to understand, appeal to, and fit with what the residents' interests and lifestyles are, so that we can deliver the proper programming and services from a library perspective. And we've also learned, deeply that building a sense of connection in the community for residents requires involvement and investment. And I think we've come in a long way as a library system in the last 3 years in terms of being involved in the community and having a commitment to the community. And we're quite proud of that. And we feel the investment that's been made in the library system has really benefited the community and the well-being of the community. And we look forward to doing more and working in partnership with the township as we go forward.
All right, thank you very much. Council, I know we've had some questions as it went along. I don't know if we have any further. Oh, Councillor Jarvis, I see your hand has reappeared. Hold the Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, so I'm now serving a second term on the library board. I've seen things go from the library sort of being in survival mode to a significantly dynamic change. And I think early on, when we decided we would bring in a CEO, and there was a significant request for monies last year to pay for that change. Well, you got to think about it.
So is this a sales pitch or is this?
Yes, it's partly a sales pitch.
We have not asked our board to do so.
Yeah, as a member of the board, I will. Yeah, there's a conflict there, I guess, in a manner of speaking. We think of a librarian as based on, pop culture as being a quiet, somewhat meek person who tells everybody to be quiet in the library. Our current CEO is anything but, almost an antithesis of that personality. And as a result of her work and outreach to the community and to, I think, our staff as well, there's been some very, very huge improvements in the way this library system operates. And to Councillor Cooper's comments about the possibility of seeing a request come down the pipe for better facilities, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. The community is growing, and the need for this type of an operation is significant. So I'm really, really happy with this presentation. I'm exceedingly happy with both our CEO And with that, I gotta note that the chair of this board has been phenomenal in the amount of work she's provided as well. So thanks, guys. Maybe I've interjected too soon, but great work.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
I don't think there was a question there, so I'll go to Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and I don't believe I have a conflict. I'm not on the board. So I can, but I will make some comments, brief as they may be. I think that over the last 3 years, but particularly with the hiring of our new executive director, or whatever fancy title you have, Stephanie. CEO, thank you. And Queen. I just like to say that, wow, what's happened with the library has gone from sleepy or whatever to exciting, very exciting. And I think we need to keep it up. So I'm very much in support. You've demonstrated, we can see through the statistics, demonstrated a huge amount of success. And I would just encourage more of the same, support this concept in the future of more space devoted to libraries. Think of what it's doing for our population. It's fantastic. And I also think that you're sort of a standalone operation. Don't give up on that. In other words, maintain your independence and motivation, because that works. Seems to be working for in your case very well. And it's not that I am suggesting you wouldn't collaborate with the township, but simply that maintain your independence and keep charging forward at the rate you're going. It's unbelievable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, and normally I end, saying something nice, but I guess a few councillors have kind of covered a lot of that. But I just, something a little extra is that one of the things that I've really appreciated about your libraries and what you've been doing is the community, I'll call it service outside the traditional, can I call it library umbrella? Hosting a food bank for a while, hosting Service Ontario in those both in MacTier, being a type of representative agent outlet for the township, like for instance the food cyclists. Those extra programs I think are extremely important, and I do believe, further to what Councillor Cooper, is that by legislation you have to be somewhat independent of the township.
Yeah.
But I also think it's wonderful that when you can serve our township, the residents of our township are providing these much more than books and movies. And I know that you tell us that, but you've demonstrated it with things like the food bank when it was when they needed temporary housing in MacTier and things like that. And so for that, I'm really optimistic that will continue going forward, that it will be your service to the to our residents will involve a larger and larger umbrella. And
well, that's the plan, and that is, I think it's well captured. Thank you, Mayor Coutier. It's really why, we don't use the word library that much anymore. We really, libraries are the community hub. And the more partnership you can have with a township or a city or a municipality, the better. And Stephanie is the person who can say, yes, we can do this, or no, we're not capable to do this, depending on what the initiative is. But we're thrilled with, our partnership with the township, which has, grown exponentially and is strong. And, we're happy to continue to do that in many, many ways. And we've got pages of ideas. So we have no lack of enthusiasm or ideas going forward.
Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. Greatly appreciate your presentation.
Our pleasure.
We'll end the delegations portion of our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Madam Clerk, any open forum requests? I didn't think so. I wish people would not follow, go one step ahead of me and think that I don't think of these things. But I think now is a good opportunity to have a brief break before we actually adopt an agenda for today and go into our regularly scheduled. And actually, it's not regularly scheduled considering this is a special council meeting, but let's reconvene at 10 to 11. That gives us 12 minutes.
Can we have a break, Mayor?
You can decide whatever you like to do, but the rest of us will be coming back in about 11 minutes.
I'm teasing.
On remote, it is a little bit difficult to hear people's microphones, especially the mayor. So if you don't mind keeping in mind that speaking closer to the mic would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll try to swallow it in the future. You should probably show up to your meetings. You wouldn't have that problem.
Well, I'm thinking of the public.
Stephen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, everybody who's remote is fine. It seems to primarily be the mayor this morning that having difficulty hearing, but I can hear Brian without any problem.
And you can hear me, so that's good. Thank you.
I can hear you too, yeah.
All right, after that break, I now actually get to read a motion. And I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the council adopts the regular agenda of October 17th, 2023 as circulated. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And that leads to our staff report, the 2024 budget, council input and preparation data. Ms. Boutiette, over to you, please.
Thank you, and through your worship, I would just like to confirm with Councillor Cooper that my mic is close enough and you can hear me clearly.
I can hear you, Julie, and it wasn't actually Steve Predko was commenting
Oh, yeah,
today.
true.
He's guilty as charged. Thank you.
Just as an observation, I would say that the participants who are remote are much louder than the participants in the room. And I'm not sure if there's a global volume setting that could be adjusted for the system, but it would be helpful because it is a little bit difficult to hear the people in the council chamber.
Oh, testing 1, 2, 3. How's my mic now, Steve? Yours is off.
Now you're muted.
It was the mayor and Julie that were quieter, but I've been able to hear you this morning, Brian. So I'm not sure what the difference is, and Councillor Jarvis as well.
All right, maybe we have to be a little less soft-spoken, but over to you, Ms. Boutiette.
I will clear my throat and I will speak a little louder. I will share my screen. This is our first budget meeting in 2024. And I will be looking to my left because I've got my notes on the left-hand screen. Before I start, I'd like to say that even though I will be doing most of the talking today, this is a collective, and we are working at the senior management level very hard to get a draft 1 ready for council. And we truly thank council for taking the time to fill out our survey that we will go through together so that the senior management team can get general guidance on what to include, exclude, increase, reduce in the operating budget for 2024. The status of the budget. Most of the departments have met with the CAO and the Director of Finance to review their departmental budget. And we have on Friday a scheduled meeting to review the internal version of draft 1. Council have filled out the surveys and we will be in line to present a first draft as per the timetable on November 1st, 2023. The council survey was a much simplified version than the 5 layered survey that was issued in prior years. Essentially having about 6 or 7 main questions. The first question was to prioritize the different services of the township, and we could see that, and I put them in the slide in order of size so that we could see a visual on what came out as prevalent and what was less prevalent. And the interpretation on this item is that it's obvious that customer services were important to council and that staff should focus on improving this across the organization. Customer service, in my opinion, and this is where I'd like council to chime in, means that customers have the ability and capability to offer themselves self-serve services online, as well as individualized personable services. This also means that there must be a way to measure current level of customer service and to set benchmarks for improvements. So what does this chart mean to council when you see it this way? And I know there wasn't a lot of time to review this ahead of time. And I'm actually taking that as a positive to get first responses on impact of this this answer.
Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate this, and I know things are moving quickly at this stage, and I'm happy to hear that we'll be getting something a little more finalized by November. Under this, and apropos of the last delegation, library is not on this, and I think I consider it a bit of an oversight, since library is part of significant part of what we do. While there's a certain amount of independence there, we do fund the library, and library is a major service to the community.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Julie. Given that customer service is number one in terms of sort of our budget focus, shall we say, I think my comment is that what is customer service? We need to gain some understanding as to what that means to all of us, to our council, to our staff, our senior management staff in particular, our CAO. And I think we need to take some time to spend some time to find out who is the customer. I don't know that we are aware of who the customer is. Could be our constituents, it could be our council, who basically are there to serve those constituents. Some may feel it's other players and stakeholders in our community as our number one customer. I think we need to understand who the customer is, and it's maybe then I'm sure there are multiple customers, but we need to find out who's number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I don't think we know that. So I would encourage our leadership team at the township to put together a customer service program, A, to understand who the customer is, and B, see if we can find a way to better communicate and serve that customer, because with number 1 becomes a support to what I've just talked about is through number 2 on the chart here, which is communications to those customers. Identify who they are and then communicate. And I'm not convinced that we're at the top of the class in that regard at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Just wanted to reinforce what Councillor Cooper said, but shift it a little bit. I think Councillor Cooper suggested that staff try to figure out what customer service is, and I think there's great expertise on council, and this would be an ideal opportunity for a working group where we sit around in a both staff and council environment and have that discussion. We haven't had that yet. We've been talking about it for at least 5 years. So it's certainly time. And to further reinforce, communications is a key element of customer service. Delighted to see that it's number 2. And one final comment here, Julie, I think laying this out the way you have is, first of all, market leading, if you will, from a technology and a communications standpoint. This is what business does all the time. They have bubble diagrams, if you will, with the biggest bubbles of the highest priority and the smallest bubbles of the lowest priority. And so, Julie, you've done an excellent job of laying out these priorities in a very simple visual way to allow us to instantly grab the priorities, and hopefully we can work with them. Thanks.
And subsequent to that, on this slide, the senior management team would be happy to know, what does this mean with the items that came out at the bottom of the list? Like, what does that mean to council in terms of budgeting for those 7, 6, 7, and 8 items?
I think that's a very interesting question, and I'm going to pipe in because nobody else has raised their hand. Number 1 is customer service. Number 7 is winter control. And I think many of our customers, if there are residents, would be concerned if we decided that winter control wasn't important and need not be done. So I think we have to be a little bit careful with the ranking here, because as much as it might make Mr. Sokash's life a lot easier if he didn't have to run any winter plows, I think we'd have a lot of residents who'd be very upset. So I think we have to be a little bit careful that we don't want to put too much emphasis on this. Same thing, you know, right in the middle, you have fire services. I don't think we want to say that we're not going to respond to fires or close down a fire station because it only got number 4 on this. So I think we have to be very careful. With
Yes,
that,
agreed. And there's also legislation that falls into all of these things. We couldn't do the things we couldn't stop doing things that we're legislated to do, of course.
Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'll just ride on that comment by the mayor. I'm in full agreement. At times, I think you've got to look at all these services being as all sort of the same level of in a critical nature, and at times, as an example, fire services would have to be at the top of the list, but we've got to be careful not to lose focus on certain items on here just because they're, say, 6 on the list as opposed to 2. With the exception possibly of the mayor's fundraising event, which we can keep at 8. It's okay. Thank you.
Councilor Predko.
And I would agree with those comments as well. I think, you know, rather than priority, these are maybe focuses for discussion and for our efforts in the budget, but I don't think that equates to lack of funding or lack of operational importance. Thank you.
Councilor Cooper.
Well, I agree with all those comments. I would just say that there are maybe some services that we provide, which we may need to look at in a different way. Doesn't mean we don't need the services. Can we outsource them? Things like that. Have we analyzed our business model and said, we need this more than we need that? We need to think about those things. And I'm just suggesting that, you know, certainly I'd like to see customer service as number 1, but there are important services that we provide that are sort of, some are saying a given. I'm saying they're a given, but who provides the service may be something. What can we do to outsource? What can we do to be more efficient? Our taxes are heavy to our residents, and we need to be able to justify what we're doing. So I just like to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second question was related a little bit to the first one. So for each of the section below, please rate if we should increase funding, decrease funding, or remain the same. In the decrease funding option, there are no results. And then we have remain the same or increase funding for these services. And that was the general consensus of the council members who filled out the survey.
I find this very interesting because one of the lowest ranked things on our priorities, the prior one was road repairs and maintenance. And here on this, when you ask the question this way, council was willing to increase funding, it seems.
There was a part B of question 2, which asked for comments. And I'm just going to read them out loud. There was no reason for a specific slide. So holding our expense to a level similar to 23 will be important to keep the tax increase lower, but we need to be mindful of our reserves for capital projects in future. Ideally, the capital projects will build in sustainable requirements. There was a comment, we are spending on too much on land-based fire services and look at outsourcing the service to our immediate neighbors, keep the water-based services with a very much slimmed down team, reduce funding for sustainability and economic development, bundling items results in mixed messages. And it's true, our budgets are very departmental based. So communication might need to increase funding. Fire and emergency services reduce funding, bylaw services increase funding. So some of them, those things are bundled together. So it did create a little bit of difficulty for council to be able to have a specific opinion. We will have to increase many budget items based solely on inflation and the increase to the cost of doing business. The preference is that we spend less, but we could see that as impractical. And then my question to council is, are there any direct takeaways that council wants to ensure is captured in draft 1?
Not seeing too many other hands at this moment.
Okay.
Oh, Councillor Jarvis.
Julie, your one comment there, I'll just ride on that one about the cost of just doing business going up. I think council and our total constituency has to be aware that things are more expensive than they were, particularly pre-COVID. And we've got to make sure that that message is well communicated as we move forward on this, because I think it's, we can talk about being fiscally responsible, but at the same time, if inflation is affecting our bottom line by whatever percentage it is, we've got to make sure that people are well aware that you can be as fiscally responsible as you want to be. But if we want to get things done, and I'll take planning for starters, because that's been a big issue for us over the years, we know we're going to have to spend the budget for that is going to be going up. I would think that in light of what Brad has to deal with, we've heard over the last couple of years about delaying projects because of significant cost increases in quotes. We know that our fire emergency service department is going to have to replace trucks. Those are big items, and add that in with the inflationary pressures. Like I said, we got to make sure we're communicating this, and I think we have to be well aware of it ourselves.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Jarvis. And just, I understand your point, Councillor Jarvis. I think it's important to remember that what you have said is a very valid point. It's can be used as a fallback excuse, and I just think we need to be careful to remember that we should learn to continually try and think outside the box. And that's, like, I know, a catchphrase, but basically it's a phrase saying, let's look at some certain things and say, can we do this differently? Can we become more efficient? And I don't think we're doing enough of that. And I'm encouraging that we do that, even with the costs going up. We need to try and look at certain things and see if there's ways that could be done more efficiently. And if we don't do that, we're not serving our constituents appropriately. Thank you.
I think it's interesting when I look at the list on this slide, and I'm going to make a broad generalization, which means you can poke holes into it. But it's interesting how in the increased funding that's generally the services we provide directly to our residents. We provide them with fire and emergency services, road repair, even planning you could put in that category. And certainly food bank is serving our residents, where a lot of them remain the same or more, I'll call it internal. It's the way we operate, the way we function within ourselves. And even though I know much of that is in order to provide services to our residents, but I think to me, what I'm reading here is that, and it's somewhat connected with the prior page as well, is that I think what most of us as counselors want is that we provide as much services as possible to our residents, and are less interested perhaps in the overhead. And I think that makes sense, because why are we here? We're here to serve our residents.
Before I move on to the next slide, I want to bring your attention in the remain the same column, the second light purple box is general governance, and it includes external funding. So taking that amount, we are going to move on to the next slide. So the next question was, in the general governance, the following will be proposed for inclusion in the external funding part of the budget. There were 3 bullets. Do you feel that this funding is adequate? All of the answers can be summarized into we needed more information. So now that council has had the related delegations, are there any suggestions to modify these what I call buckets or allowances for external funding in the draft 1?
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Julie. And I think we indicated last year that it was appropriate for us to take out the Honey Harbor testing program. And I saw in the budget from SSEA that it was added back in. I think we need to consider having that program in Honey Harbor only, reduced to 0 until such time as we can determine there's a need for it. And at the moment, it seems that there isn't. So my recommendation is that that we carry on with what we did last year, which is use the program that we have other than the Honey Harbor testing.
Correct. In point number 1, the second SSEA is actually moving it to 0. So that's already at 0 in the proposed draft 1.
Thank you, Julie. I can see that. I just want to make sure that we don't slip backwards. Thank you.
Councillor Predko.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So I am a little bit concerned about the increase on the public library line. I know I'm as ecstatic and as supportive of our library, I think, as the rest of our council is, but the number on their presentation this morning was an 18% increase. The number we're seeing from staff is 41%. And just looking at the presentation from the library this morning, comparing it to the number here, they have taken the total, which includes the grants from the other areas, which haven't increased, which is what results in the 18% increase as opposed to the 42. We had a very large increase for the library last year, and I'm really concerned that this trajectory is not sustainable. I do think that a good portion of what this increase is behind that staff member, and I think that merits a detailed conversation down the road to really understand the value that that's going to bring, not just to the library, but to the township as well, and try to understand where some of their other increases are coming from. I know programming is really important, and we need to be getting out and getting our community engaged and involved. And I think that's a conversation we have every month at council about how do we keep our residents engaged as a community. And that's part of what the library is here for. But we just need to be careful of the increase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is council as a whole proposing a different number or a maximum in percentage
Are you referring to the library?
for, yeah,
Well, I think, I mean, we've had one counselor express concern and that maybe getting a little more information as to what the actual benefit to our residents will be from that additional employee would help us finalize that number.
so for draft one, we're leaving the full number as requested.
What, at this moment? Yeah, I think so. Counselor Hazelton.
Thank you. This may sound like a broken record, but on the SSEA number, we've got a number of there of 83,000. They want to go to 93,000. We are paying Dr. Chow Fraser a total of $55,000 to do a much more comprehensive water testing, both on the bay and the inland lakes. We've got the GBB coming up with an RFP to do a comprehensive water study program for the next several years. I'm very concerned. We have never been able to get a clear understanding of what the value is to our community from SSEA. I think that when it comes to kind of focusing on what we're spending money on and what we're getting in return, I mean, yeah, SSEA may have done some good work in the past, but you've heard in their report that they've identified blue-green algae. We've had blue-green algae identified at South Bay for the last few years. But SSEA began as a remedial action program to correct the problems that were being identified. And we have not seen any remedial action programs, even though we've been asking for them for 5 years. We've not seen any remedial action programs coming out of SSEA. We have asked SSEA for guidelines on what the township should be using to ensure that any new builds in the Severn Sound comply with the background levels of nutrients in the bay. Once again, crickets. So I think that when it comes to focusing on numbers where there's little value that has been brought to our community, at least I'm not seeing the value. We're seeing way more value from Dr. Chow Fraser and her team. So that number, which I know we have some long-term commitments for, but we've been asking for 5 years to clearly understand that model and understand how we can initiate a termination clause so that we can get the attention of SSEA, so that when we are paying them money, we actually get services. So I think that when it comes to these numbers, I'm going to once again ask that we get the contract out in front of us at council for us to review, so that we can then provide staff direction on what the steps should be in the form of a commitment to SSEA, because that 93,000 number, I'm just not seeing the value to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
I'll be very brief. All the comments that have been made by Councillor Hazelton are very appropriate, and ones that I've articulated in the past, from not all of them, but from time to time. And I'm looking for ROI, and the increase here is really hard to understand. So I think we need to have a much better understanding of the ROI that we're seeing from SSEA. It also remind us to sit on the board of directors, and voting for this would be problematic. Thank you.
Councillor Wojcik.
I thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, just a few comments relating to Councillor Hazelton's comments. He said that, and I'll quote him, that he heard crickets from SSEA in the last 2 years. I might suggest to Councillor Hazelton that we heard crickets when they were here doing a delegation this morning, and the appropriate place for those questions would have been during that delegation. To bring it up when they're not here to the finance part of it, I think is quite short-sighted on our behalf. So there was the opportunity to ask those questions. And like you said, there was crickets from the two councillors that are commenting about it now. If you have questions, I'm here, I'm open as they are, and certainly reach out to me or SSEA and you'll probably get the answers to your questions. That's what they were here for. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Those questions have been asked in the past and not answered. Thank you.
Councillor Petco.
Oh, sorry, my video was off. Just, I had made and if Julie talks about the comments made by councillors in this section, if we're moving to an RFP for water quality testing, I think that number should come out of the municipal grant bucket and either go into the joint local municipal boards or some other section of general governance, just as an observation.
Any other comments on this page at this time?
Just to clarify, the numbers shown on this page are staying as is in draft one.
Yeah, we haven't made any final decisions, so I'd say yes.
Okay. Question 4, this was in relation to revenues and user fees. So for each of the section below, please read if you would increase, decrease, or keep user fees at their current level. There were no desires to decrease any user fees. So I changed the last column instead of decrease to review. And staff is aware and are always looking at user fees. There are big changes coming in cemetery user fees and also planning user fees. The question for council would be, so this is on our radar. Would council like this in parallel with the budget process in Q4 or in 2024 Q1, Q2 in preparation for the 25 budget?
My immediate question is, why are we hesitating?
Time, but it can be done in parallel.
Councillor Bochek, is your hand still up or is it new? Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sorry. I apologize, Ms. Bochek, but I was just a little confused as to if we can incorporate a new fee schedule in the 2024 budget. Why would we want to wait until 2025?
Perfect.
Okay.
Direction received.
And I would imagine that most of council wants, I'll call it fair fees to our residents. And if we are charging them less than the cost they are incurring, we should be reviewing those fees to make it fairer.
And question 5 was open-ended question. Please provide any other input ideas that SMT should consider for the 2024 budget cycle. These are pastes pretty much verbatim of the comments received. So I could leave it for a quick review. And I would like to stop on bullet 2 because bullet 2 was actually a direct question back to SMT.
Well, I'm going to make one remark before the other hands go up, and that is, you mentioned the water quality testing. We know that there is a RFP coming forward and trying to get new quotes and ideas and for our water testing. So I think no matter what we put into the budget, it's almost like a hold, because we're not going to resolve that RFP and analyze the consequences until sometime after the budget is approved. So I think, and we've already heard a few comments about concerns about the value we are or are not getting with some of the water testing programs we've had in the past. So that's clearly in the works. So I think the best we can do for the budget at this point is put an amount maybe somewhat equivalent to what it was last year as a hold until we resolve that. Because I mean, otherwise, I think we'd be discussing it prematurely, given that we've already agreed to get an RFP on water testing for the township as a whole.
And through your worship, the budget concept in general is a lot of that. Some of them we know exactly what is coming, for example, software costs, but a lot of the items are placeholders or contingencies for what may happen in a year based on, you know, history of what has happened in the past. So on the second bullet, I would open the floor to SMT to discuss with council if there's any internal things that we see that they don't have. And if no one wants to start, I did think of one that I think could be put on the table. Based on the answers, I'm going back to the slide number 1 where we saw priorities. There are things that could be funded from another source. So we've been discussing short-term rentals quite a bit, and council went on the path of registration versus an accommodation tax. And I want to bring back that this is a lot of work. And if we're going to do all the work, we could benefit from an accommodation tax, which is directly passed off to non-residents. It is administered by the residents who have short-term rentals, but really the MAT tax itself is passed on to the renter. It's done in a lot of townships, would generate a lot of revenues, which we could then use to fund things like the mayor's fundraising event and also the food bank, which we need additional funds for. So I just want to put that back on the table, that when short-term rentals comes back, that you keep that in the back of your mind, that if we were going to do a lot of the work for the registration, the additional part of the MAT tax itself is not a lot of additional work.
Thank you. Councilor Jarvis, I did see your hand.
Actually, Julie partially answered that question. So we'll let these continue on as they are.
Okay. Councilor Cooper.
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank Julie for bringing that up. I have been very sort of concerned about the fees associated with short-term rentals, and I think I sort of revert to an old business school phrase, keep it simple, stupid. And I think maybe what Julie's suggesting is a keep it simple, stupid solution, as opposed to much more administration and questionable long-term benefits. So just would encourage going down the road that she's discussing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Van Dam.
So I see the piece in there about eliminating the sustainability department and partially outsourcing the fire service. That in itself is, to outsource the fire service is, I'm going to take a fair amount of work to do that. We can look at it as part of the master fire plan, but it would take, it wouldn't be able to happen in the 2024 budget cycle.
My question, if I may, if you're outsourcing fire services, who are you outsourcing it to?
Well, Your Worship, there's a number of things that there's a lot more detail and a lot more questions that would end up coming towards council to find out what your intent is. I just don't want to start going down that road if it's not council, full council's intention to outsource it, because I can tell you this is a substantial amount of work.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Sorry about that. Yeah, not sure. I happen to agree with Tony that it's not something that can be solved in the short term, but in the longer term, it's worthy of at least examining. I'm talking about thinking outside of the box, looking for ways to get more efficiencies. There has been discussion in the past. We do have neighbors, for example, in Severn and the township of Muskoka Lakes, that might be able to provide services from the top or sort of above or beside us and below us is a possibility. And we should at least take a look at that. It's nothing that shouldn't be considered a reflection on the quality of the service that we have today at all. It's not. It's simply, let's take a look at it. As far as the sustainability department is concerned, we heard from our consultants many years ago, KPMG, that you have a department like that and nobody your size has one of those departments. So why do you do that? So those are the reasons for those questions. They're mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? All right, Ms. Boutiette, what else would you like to learn from us?
So the next part of the presentation is just giving council some background information. I've heard on a few occasions that we don't know what our assessment, the sum of our assessment is. So I went into detail about how our assessment is built and divided. And I also did comparison with our sister and our district. And essentially the district would be the sum of all of the Muskoka municipalities. And below that is the residential tax rate. And we are the only municipality in the district of Muskoka who has a separate capital rate. The other capital portions are all built into their general levy. And then also below that, just showed what our levy is in comparison to our other district municipalities. And that is for your observation and questions, if there are any.
Councillor Cooper.
You're on mute, Councillor Cooper.
Keep getting my hand down, but now it's not gone down. Oh, well. Anyway, Julie, this is really interesting information and helpful. I wondered if you could add to this column, unless I'm missing it, but whereby we examine the number of occupied properties. I think that information is available through GeoHub if nobody else. And so on a sort of occupied property basis, if we have, I'll make up a number, 6,000 occupied properties or occupied by residents and businesses, let's say there are 6,000 of them for argument's sake, not far off, I don't think. And you divide that into the assessment. How does that play out in terms of each one of these municipalities? It might be very helpful for us to understand what we're collecting on a per property basis. Is that something that you could do or not?
If I could define occupied properties, you mean not second residences?
We're getting 83% of our population is a second residence. So no, we can't exclude them. We would include all the residents.
So if you're talking about only commercial and industrial vacant, that's identified here. You want to count instead of an assessment sum?
I would like to see the assessment total divided by the number of occupied properties, most of which would be seasonal residents, but there would be others as well, like businesses or whatever. But if you were to break it out by the number of occupied properties and did that for each one of these columns, we'd get a picture as to what sort of revenues we get through assessment. Is that, I don't think it's that complicated, is it?
In other words, if I could, we have a total assessment of almost $3 billion.
Right.
If the figure of 6,000 properties is correct, then the average assessment is $500,000.
Right. And so how does that compare across the board and to the total district? I just think it would be another way of having a comparable to understand who and what we are. That's all. It's another line, really.
Yes, that's doable.
I'd appreciate it. I find those kind of statistics very helpful to put things in perspective for each of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to make the observation that the assessment on the industrial side for our township is significantly less, for obvious reasons, than all the other municipalities and towns within the district. And I think we've got to really understand how that affects our bottom line and the tax base, because ultimately, instead of having some industry help pay our taxes, we're paying them, and it's a huge factor there.
I think it's also very interesting to note that our total assessment is a hair over 10% of the total district assessment, which helps give us a bit of a perspective too on all this, and that yes, we are paying just over 10% of the district property taxes based on the assessment values.
And the last slide, I'm now wishing that I didn't put this slide because I don't have all the answers onto why such a small amount of in-year assessment change. And I will go back to MPAC to see, because there seems to be a difference between the number that I have and the number that the building department has provided me.
Don't you hate it when a mayor asks a difficult question?
Just before the meeting, but
Well, that's because
we'll dig into it.
Yes.
We'll get there.
Please.
I thought the province had decided there wouldn't be any change at all. So why are we seeing a 16% increase?
This is not 16%, this is 0.16%, so less
Oh, yeah.
than half a percent. And these are growth based on new construction.
Oh, of course. Okay, thank you.
And when the suggestion is that our building department only improved construction of $4 million in the year, I find that shockingly low, because one of your bills would have been that much, let alone all of them.
So we looked at some numbers just this morning, and Cayley had just recently done an annual report for 2022, and the average is about 57 million per year. So I'm going to dig a little bit more on.
I'd appreciate that, because we like to make sure that in fairness, if somebody has built some significant improvement on their property, their assessment should be going up, so they pay a little bit more of the share of the property taxes. Well, but that's the way the system works, is that if we're going to tax property value, if your property value goes up, sorry. All right. Well, thank you very much for this information. Now the question is, if any councillor would like to make any other broad general comments on the work as you go towards presenting us sometime in early November with draft one of who knows how many drafts of our budget.
Hopefully 3.
Hopefully 3. Okay. Councillor Cooper.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much, Julie, for the report. It's very helpful, and I think we still have some more work to do. I think we need to keep our pencils sharp so that we are very careful with our spending. And I think the point that Councillor Jarvis makes is really quite valid. Most of the weight of our costs associated with running this place are on the backs of our residents. There's very little commercial support, and we need to remember that we need to not tax people to the point where they say, "I've got to get out of here." So that's concerning to me, and it's unfair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. My question is directed towards Julie, and I'm really just wondering, it's very preliminary, I know, and you can't tell us what the big number is going to be for 2024, but is there anything, in your mind that you would like us to be mindful of as we await for the first draft in November? Is there a particular area? Is it due to inflation? Is it due to labor costs in a particular area, or something that hasn't been addressed that we're going to be surprised by, and we need to be emotionally prepared before we get to November? Is there anything like that you can help us with?
Across the board, there are significant increases, as you saw with just the few delegations this morning. The construction price index has played anywhere between 7 and 12%. So that affects everything that we do that has construction based in it. So whether that's people hauling sand and salt, to road contractors, to really anybody who does any kind of physical services for the township, install of a generator, things of that sort. We are going into a collective bargaining year, which creates an uncertainty for the budget. So we could aim high, we could aim low. Regardless, it's going to cost whatever we end up bargaining for. I, on the conservative side, would say aim high for that COLA increase. I see from council's input that there is a general consensus that we don't want anything cut. How we do business, as Councillor Cooper put it, is heard loud and clear. But even exploring new methods of doing business costs money. So there's not going to be a pleasant surprise, if I could put it that way.
Thank you.
That's not a cheery note. Councillor Cooper.
I'd just like to commit to Councillor Predko that I'm here for your emotional support. Thank you.
CEO Mariotti.
Yes, good morning, Council. What we're going to do is for each department, any increase above a certain threshold, whether it's 4 or 5%, whatever number staff chooses that's kind of, a red flag, we will highlight that. And then each department head will go through an explanation as to why it is above that certain threshold for council's understanding. We're also, to try and mitigate these increases, staff will come back with some suggestions that have been brought up in the past, which is a kind of a user pay type fees. I'll give you an example, like burn permits, for example. There are neighboring municipalities that charge $40 for a burn permit. I'm not saying we do that, but it may be something that council considers a gradual step in terms of trying to absorb some of the some of the general costs is to implement some additional user fees. And as has been discussed earlier, we will go back and review our current charges and bring them up to date, because they are from 2021, I believe. So they'll be 3 years old next year. So just some additional information for your consideration.
Thank you. Interestingly, I think it was just yesterday, talking to one of our neighboring mayors who was quite pleased with the mat tax they brought in because of how it was significant revenue that offset other expenses or losses that were being faced. So it's, well, as Councilor Cooper said, thinking outside the box might lead to other interesting options. We'll have to see how everything unfolds, but I think those things are worth considering. Councilor Bocheck.
Thank you. And I too feel the same way that Councillor Cooper does, that by looking at new innovative ways to gain revenues is of extreme importance. And things like we're looking at the short-term rental policies and how we move forward that. Obviously, if you speak to the fire department, they say there's far more restraints on a commercial building that's going to be rented out than there is in a residential building, and perhaps some funding from the people that have the Airbnbs to come into compliance with the fire department rules. And that we need to look at other streams of revenues for people doing business in our township to make sure that they maintain a certain amount of safety and liability to their constituents or to their customers. So I agree with Councillor Cooper. Let's look outside the box and let's look where people are taking advantage of the system we have in place and start to charge fees for what we're currently giving out for free. Thank you.
Not seeing any of their hands raised. I'm going to say thank you very much for this, and I hope it's given you some insight as to how council is thinking as you prepare draft one. And so greatly appreciate it. And I have moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. The council accept the presentation for information purposes. All those in favor? And that is carried. And I have moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by Councillor Bocheck. Be it resolved, the council adopts bylaw 2023-099 to confirm the proceedings of the October 17th, 2023 special council meeting. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Councillor Cooper.
Can we stay till 4 o'clock? Just kidding.
You may. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Bocheck. Be it resolved, the council now adjourn at 11:48 until November 14th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that is carried. We are adjourned, and thank you very much.